It may just be virtual reality, but the subject matter is anything but a game. The Los Angeles Police Commission has voted in favour of allowing its officers to use drones. It means they'll be the largest police force in America to use the remote control devices. Officers will be expected to adhere to a specific set of rules. Only SWAT teams will be allowed to operate the drones in what's been described as tense situations. Every flight will have to be documented and reviewed, and weapons and facial recognition technology are prohibited. But many have been predicting problems for years.
By 2025, we're looking at $82 billion just here in the United States, 100,000 new jobs. The drone industry is ready to explode, but the policymaking hasn't quite kept up yet.
Drones are already a common sight in the skies over California. Just this month they were sent in to survey the damage caused by wildfires, and now they'll be used for search and rescue missions, something that drone enthusiasts have been calling for some time.
At the top of the intelligence chain, you would like to tell a drone something like, go find my kid's lost in the woods. And it will not only just find any kid, it will find your kid.
Privacy activists say mass surveillance is a problem, and some US cities, such as Seattle, have successfully won the battle to stop police using drones. But the American public is divided. A survey earlier this year suggested that 39% of people oppose the use of drones by officers, while 36% said it wasn't a problem. But when it comes to private use, attitudes are different, with more drones being sold in the US in 2016 than all previous years combined. The drone program in Los Angeles will be tested for a year and reviewed by the Police Commission. Only then, if successful, will it be given the green light for takeoff. Vanessa Keneally, The Newsmakers.
Well, to discuss this, I'm joined from Los Angeles by Hamid Khan. He's the campaign coordinator at the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. And in New York, Eric Piza. He's the associate professor at the Department of Law and Police Science at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Gentlemen, thank you to the both of you for joining us here on The Newsmakers. A very exciting topic. Hamid, let's begin with you. Are authorities greenlighting a move towards a more Orwellian society?
Well, I think the lead-in that you had, and of course when all the sensationalism and the hoopla settles down, then the real impact emerges. We talked about SWAT in this lead-in, and of course, ironically, this is the 50th anniversary of SWAT as well. We had heard the same stories, same sensationalism, special circumstances, hostage situation, barricaded gunmen. But when you look at the reality 50 years later, what we are looking at is that close to about 80% of the time, the SWAT is being used for low-level drug offenses, no-knock warrants, and lives are being lost, little children are being killed, smoke bombs, and various other things, homes destroyed. So you know, when we get beyond this sensationalism about technology, what needs to be really discussed is the human impact. And people all around Los Angeles have vehemently opposed, based on the history of what has happened with the Los Angeles Police Department, based on their issues around mission creep, that how mission will expand, based upon how Los Angeles's LAPD is one of the most militarized police department in the country. And let's face the fact, the basic intent of the drone has always been that it's a surveillance and a weapon delivery platform. So this raises a lot of issues and a lot of concerns.
Eric, you heard what Hamid said. Can we control? Can we stop this slide, or is it just an inevitable step in this direction?
Well, I mean, everybody is naturally, rightfully concerned when a technology like this is implemented that it will lead to a slippery slope. And, you know, I think we could come to some general agreement that high-risk situations that require SWAT to respond to an active shooter, for example, that seems to me to be an appropriate use for a drone. So what I think the appropriate next step would be for the LAPD or any other police department using this technology to make sure that their policies are ironclad and leave no wiggle room for the use of these types of technologies for unintended purposes, right? I mean, if it's a low-level situation, if it's done more preemptively or preventatively instead of in response to a high-risk situation, that's where that's where some concerns can definitely creep in. And I think it's important to note here too that drones are by no means the first foray into video surveillance that police departments have done. We could look at video surveillance cameras in public places. I mean, once upon a time, that was an extremely controversial issue. And now, I mean, they're pretty commonplace throughout the world. So I think there's some lessons to be learned with those types of technologies that perhaps police can kind of toe the line here by implementing a technology in a way that maximizes crime control capacity, but simultaneously adheres to the citizens' civil liberties.
Hamid, you don't believe that these proper policies can be put in place?
I think that's where, yeah, well, I think that's wherein lies the problem. And when we're looking at certain, I mean, technology, of course, technology advances are always the argument that is used. And yes, there has been advancements in medical technology, which have been life-saving devices. We are now speaking remotely to each other from different parts of the world. So yes, these are the advances in technology. But I think when we look at technology, we have to look at that what is the potential impact and the harm that the technology can cause. In whose hands is that technology going to be placed in, and what has been the history of that institution or an organization who's going to be using that technology? And I think when we look at the Los Angeles Police Department, it has a very, very long history. I mean, since just going back for the last 50 years, after the Watts Rebellion, there was a McCone Commission that was established. After Rodney King, we had the Christopher Commission, and then the LAPD was under a federal consent decree from June of 2001 until May of 2013. And even in that, I mean, Eric spoke about the technology of where video surveillance had been used, while under the consent decree, the LAPD installed dash cameras and digital in-car video cameras as well. And what do we find out? I mean, this happened in 2012. By 2014, 92 out of 300 patrol cars, the officers had intentionally sabotaged and broken the antennas. Then let's look at the experiences on the street. And I think that's where really the real debate lies, that what is the ultimate human impact? We can talk about technology all day long. In 2011, in 2012, in 2015, in 2016, LAPD remains the most murderous police department in the country. It has killed the most people of any police department. So I think when you look at all these facts, when you put all these things together, when we look at the counterterrorism program, let's look at the suspicious activity reporting program, let's look at predictive policing. We're constantly told that technology is going to give us answers with all these fancy names, but it remains to be yet another way to cause harm to people and cause murders in our communities.
Well, listen, we're in complete agreement that the field of criminal justice far too often looks at technology like an easy button, right? Well, just install cameras and crime will go down, or just put the drone up into the sky and it'll produce all of these benefits. What often gets lost in the equation is the human factors, and you need human beings to actually successfully implement a technology for police to get any kind of benefit on it. And I understand there does seem to be some local concerns with the LAPD, but from my experience working with police departments in other parts of the country, I think police should be commended for really thinking through these issues and implementing technology, in a manner that considers a lot of these human factors. For example, I mentioned video surveillance cameras a few minutes ago. One city that I've worked with prior to implementing their citywide system, they worked with the ACLU to draft policies. They worked with software developers, both inside of the department and also third-party vendors, to do things like make sure that windows in homes were actually not visible by the cameras. So if a camera zoomed into a home, the windows will automatically black out. So I think, those are some success stories about how perhaps something like this can be implemented in a worthwhile manner. But again, I'm in complete agreement that that can be easier said than done sometimes, and citizen concerns may, kind of overpower those types of decisions.
Hamid, I want to take a step back. What if you were to think about drones from a different perspective? Think of them as helicopters, larger helicopters. Today we don't have problems helicopters surveying the skies and chasing criminals, do we?
Well, here's what I was going to bring into the conversation, that when we look at policing in the United States, we cannot be having this conversation without grounding ourselves in race. And what does it mean, and the racist history and the institutional and the structural racism that runs very deep in police departments. You speak about helicopters. Well, that was one of the issues that people in Los Angeles raised. I mean, helicopters are known as ghetto birds. LAPD has one of the largest helicopter fleets in the country, and how helicopters have been used to traumatize, to harass, to intimidate communities in South Central Los Angeles, in East Los Angeles, in Central Los Angeles. Just in May of this year, the LAPD used a high-powered rifle and shot and killed somebody in the community of Sunland from their helicopter. So, of course, they have a large helicopter fleet, and I think that's what really we should be speaking about, that what are the people saying? I mean, this goes back to the credibility of LAPD as well. The drone issue is not new. It started back in 2014 when the Seattle Police Department supposedly gifted these two Dragonflyer X6 drones to LAPD. People rose up, and people have been speaking about it. So at that time, Chief Beck had said that he would not, and I quote, that he would not sacrifice public trust for a piece of police equipment. Well, we come back like 3.5 years later, over 5,500 petition signatures. LAPD had their own 4 community meetings, each overwhelming rejection of that. LAPD put out their own surveys. Out of 1,675 surveys, 97 said yes, right? Less than 6%. Then LAPD put out their guidelines for feedback from the community, and this is their own assistant chief who gave us these numbers. Out of 1,100 emails they received, only 9 said yes. So I think when we talk about protect and serve, who are they protecting, who are they serving, and if the very people that they claim to protect and serve are saying, no, we don't want this in our communities, then I think we should be listening. In any democratic society, we should be listening to the people, and we cannot just be stuck that the modern day technology and the advancements of technology are going to save lives.
Hamid, tell me this, just a second. Let me just jump in for a second. If this drone trial period would have been rolled out in any other city besides Los Angeles, would this be a different argument?
Not really, because I think what we are seeing is how the mission is expanding for the drones, and people are becoming increasingly aware of that. Just in August of 2015, the state of North Dakota passed legislation where police drones can be equipped with non-lethal weapons, and they're not non-lethal. Tasers, rubber bullets. Tasers on an average kill about 50 people a year around the United States. So I think people are increasingly becoming aware, and like I said, when the dust settles from all this sensationalism and all this conversation around technology, when reality sets in, and particularly among communities of color, particularly around black communities and brown communities and poor communities. We've seen what's been going on since Michael Brown was murdered in Ferguson, and we've seen how people have been really coming out on the street. So no, I mean, I don't think that people are going to have are going to be with open arms, are going to be embracing this kind of militarized and basically a technology which is a surveillance and a weapon delivery platform.
Okay, Eric. There are immense benefits for drones. Currently under this program, we know that the drones cannot use facial recognition systems. But what can the police department do to sort of ease the public concern that this won't be the next step?
Well, to me, I mean, I think transparency would be key. If I was a resident of Los Angeles, what I would love to see would be some kind of public depository or website or something where footage taken from drones is made, you know, freely available, and people could actually see the type of stuff that the drones are collecting. Again, if I was a, you know, resident of Los Angeles, that would ease my concerns that the drones are kind of being used in an invasive manner. The other thing that I would like to see would be some kind of, you know, firm policy or legislation or something that keeps use very restricted to very particular situations. From the story that played at the top of this, you know, LAPD is saying that it's only going to be used for active shooter situations, for high-risk situations. So if there is a way to write that in stone to make sure that use never expands beyond that, again, if I were a resident of Los Angeles, that would make me feel better about the drone program as well.
Hamid, is anything written in stone?
There is nothing as such in policing that can be written in stone. Policy it adapts to mission creep. Policy opens itself for mission creep. Once you open the door, then slowly the need expands, and slowly we see how policy shifts. And then for the Los Angeles Police Department, with the history that they've had, even when policies have been written in stone, they have been repeatedly violated. We talked about what they did. There was a clear-cut policy for the use of dash cameras, how 92 out of 300 patrol cars, they intentionally broke those antennas. There's been a whole lot of other, basically, violations of policies that LAPD is involved in. And when we talk about the people of Los Angeles, I'll give you one small example, that over the last 5 years, even a policy where people feel that the LAPD is engaging in racial profiling and biased policing, there have been over 3,000 complaints of racial profiling, and guess what? Zero, none has been sustained, meaning that everybody, the whole 3,000 people, is a community of liars. So I think we have to really look at the history, we have to look at the record, and moving forward, we have to really be aware that how this is going to impact our communities in the long run.
Eric, talking about history, as Hamid was just doing so, when you look at the rollout of any new technology in the past, whether they're cameras mounted on traffic lights, whether they're cameras mounted inside of cars or on vests, what have police departments learned from this process, and how can it make this an easier journey for everybody?
Well, I think it's important to recognize that crime prevention policing is very localized, right? I mean, they're local solutions, and no two strategies or programs look the same when implemented in different cities because there's a lot of different considerations. I started off my comments a few minutes ago talking about the one city I worked with that had a decent active relationship with the ACLU, and they were able to roll out some of their controversial surveillance tactics perhaps a little bit easier than they would have been able to if they did not have that working relationship. So to me, I think that's the big takeaway here. I think police perhaps should do a little bit more homework to look at, places where these things have been implemented effectively, places where these types of surveillance strategies have been accepted somewhat by the public. I don't think we're ever going to have 100% acceptance, and try to understand the local context of those successful implementations and see if they could tailor it to their jurisdictions.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing, that when we are speaking about surveillance and we are speaking about surveillance technology, we cannot have this conversation as if the technology is operating in isolation. These are massive architectures of information sharing environments that have been created. Data processing, data integration is the key. Programs like data processing systems like Palantir, which process information within seconds. So you may have a drone which may be operating, but then you have the trapwire technology, you have Stingray technology, you have DRT, dirt boxes, you have automatic license plate readers, you have CCTV, you have various other ways that points of entry that technology is picking up information about people, and how this information then is gathered, how it is stored, and how is it shared. So I think when we are speaking about surveillance, we have to look at it that what has happened is that a massive stalker state, that how people are being traced, how they are tracked, how they are monitored, how they are being stalked is being used as well. Let's look at the hotspot policing, predictive policing of location-based, person-based, suspicious activity reporting program, various other programs that I'd mentioned earlier as well. So I think when we are looking at the surveillance apparatus, it's not only one technology that is operating in isolation. This is a multiplier effect from various sources that information is being picked up. So you may have a policy that one particular piece may not be doing this, but when you fuse it, and of course, there are fusion centers as well, where these are actual warehouses of information gathering, mega spy centers around the United States. So that's what we should be looking at, that what would be the long-term impact of all these. Now, we're looking at these advancements in real-time facial recognition, biometrics, artificial intelligence. Yes, at this time, the drones may be said that, well, they're not going to be using them, but as technology, as we're having, ironically, we're having this conversation that to submit to the advancement in technology, then that technology is advancing in that direction. And that will be incorporated into these tools.
Eric, final thoughts, convince me.
Well, I mean, from my experience working with police departments, even police departments that have high amounts of these types of technologies, I mean, I don't quite think we're at the point where they're all speaking to each other and where we have this catalog database that allows the government to, frankly, spy on its residents. I think that's overstating the capacity of a lot of these technologies once you, kind of look under the hood and get within the agencies and see what they're actually, what their capacities actually are.
Well, gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Hamid Khan from Los Angeles for the campaign coordinator for Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, and Eric Piza, an associate professor in criminology, joining us from New York. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. No doubt the technology is taking off.